Hello, welcome to the second session of our reflection on children, the community of God, and how they will be affected within their communities or schools. I don't know how it is for you, but sometimes when we're thinking about these things, we go back to Scripture and we think, what can actually help us here? And I just want to very briefly, for a few minutes, talk about the book of Philippians and how that can help us. Not the whole book, just a couple of verses. But then we're going to talk to somebody from Prayer Spaces in Schools and Sara from Engage Worship to help us understand how we can enter into the life of the child and help them process some of the things that are happening to them. But first, Philippians 4, verses 4 to 9. As many of you will know, this passage is the one that talks about dwelling on that which is pure. And as the narrative unfolds, there's a call to rejoice, there's a call to gentleness, there's a call to not worry, there's a call to prayer. And then there's this reflection about the peace of God. And we understand the peace of God to be based around the word shalom that we've mentioned before, and an unfolding of the goodness of God. You know, in the book of Psalms, it says, surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. So the shepherd that was following the sheep in that story was following them with goodness and mercy. And then it closes in and says, think about those things that are true, honourable, just, pure, and pleasing. Think about those things. Now, let's ask ourselves, when do children get to think? Well, sometimes they're thinking all the time. Their minds are, in overdrive. They're connecting the dots. They're learning about life. But sometimes they might not have a very sure guide or very little understanding themselves of how life works and what connects and so on. Other times, they may be getting all kinds of benign or actually not at all benign influences from the books they read, the culture that they watch. They might be watching the news and in some ways despairing of what's happening within the understanding that they have. Where is the child's mind dwelling? How are they understanding life? I mean, this is a question for us as adults. Where our mind dwells, where it lives, where it reflects, will often influence the outcomes for us. And so we're going to show you two interviews. One of them is with Liz Ogborne from Prayer Spaces in Schools. And she'll talk about some of the practical things that they're doing at this time and post the pandemic. But she also reflects on the experience that the child often has, some kind of spiritual engagement while they're in the prayer room. And then we're talking to Sara Hargreaves, who's written about how families can talk to children about their emotions. But much of what she says in that book can help all the rest of us, help children understand their emotions, and particularly to understand that Jesus was both human and divine, and in his humanity, he really felt emotions. We're going to show you those two interviews back to back. You might like to take notes and perhaps go away. It's a bit like sometimes in our churches, we do this slow reading or lectio divina, where you read something and then, or you hear something and then you pull out something and look at it in more depth. I hope that in this next several minutes that you'll find something and pull it out in more depth and then think how you might apply that to your life. Thank you. I'm with Liz Ogborne today, and one of the things we're going to look at now is prayer, spirituality, and schools. Prayer Spaces in Schools almost happened by accident with 4 different groups around the country exploring the idea out of their existing connection with 24/7 prayer. It's now developed into a much more significant resource being used in a huge number of schools. And so we wanted to talk today to Liz about how this is relevant to the current situation and how it will be relevant going forward. How can we help children as they explore their spirituality in the prayer spaces? So, Liz, what has Prayer Spaces actually been up to during the pandemic?
Hi, Dave. It's nice to be here. Thanks for having us. I'm just going to share my screen with you because I have some nice photographs to show as I speak, which will hopefully make things a little bit more interesting. Just give me a second. Okay, hopefully you can see that. Well, Prayer Space in schools has been quite busy over the last 10 months or so. When lockdown happened in March, all the schools closed, so all normal prayer spaces and school activity had to cease. Parents found themselves at home trying to educate their children as well as juggle work. And there was a need that we recognised that for spaces within the home where children and young people and families could together or alone reflect, process what was going on, to pray, to continue to develop their spiritual lives. And so Prayer Spaces at Home was born. And this is basically a series of prayer activities which we adapted from our current range of prayer activities, which are all on our website. We created some new as well. And these Prayer Space at Home activities could be put together with a few things that you probably have in your house as a way of reflecting, praying, processing all that was going on. And so they focused in on some of the particular issues that people were facing, issues around disorientation, anxiety, fear, loss, sudden and unpredictable change that's been happening, obviously, at a rapid rate for the whole year. And so the prayer activities help people to process some of that stuff. And we've had over 42,000 downloads from the Prayer Space at Home site since we set it up around kind of April, May last year. And it was great also to collaborate with the Church of England on that project. They featured one of our Prayer Space at Home activities on their Faith at Home website, which was great too. We also then went on, as things began to slightly open up, to create a space on our website where we have ideas for how you could host or offer COVID-safe prayer spaces to schools, a little window that we had in the summer in that beautiful weather. And so some prayer spaces, as you can see in the picture there, happened outside during that time, which was great. We had lots of nice stories about that happening, but also there were ideas on that page on our website around prayer spaces in a bag, for instance, which was individual bags for students that a local church could deliver for students in school. And this is an example from Chelsea Academy in Kensington in London, who gave out 360 of these individual bags to all of their year 7s and year 8s. And then each bag contained 4 items to help them to think and reflect and process all that was going on. And you can see a photograph there of them holding up their torch, their light, as they reflected on being a light. How could they be a light in their own homes, in their schools, in their communities, in their societies? So it was all about adaptation, as for most organisations over this last 10 months, just adapting. As normal teams of volunteers couldn't go into school, could we create inventive and innovative ways for prayer spaces, for space in school for children and young people to reflect, process, and to pray if they wanted to. We also cracked on with a few bits of development work. We're currently working on a project to completely redevelop our website to make it more international friendly, because prayer spaces in schools is growing, particularly around Europe in many countries. And so our new website will reflect that and have pages which are specifically for those different nations. We also started up we've started a series of monthly sessions, which are a time for people to gather online with us to really inspire them and equip them to host really great prayer spaces in schools once this is all over. And then in the autumn, we had the chance to work with the Archbishop of Youth Trust to develop these sacred spaces for Advent as well. So we've been quite busy.
One of the great things about 24/7 prayer is this engagement with the five senses, and it's great to see those bags, because I think a lot of the people that are listening to the call could take hold of that idea. When we look at the scripture, it does involve all five senses. There's stuff to do with smell and hearing, and every part of who we are. And sometimes we, of course, equate prayer with a verbal declaration rather than this rather more engaged experience. And so you've had opportunity during the pandemic, and however much longer we're going to have to live under those conditions. But one of the things that we're looking at today is how are we going to work in the post-pandemic era, and what does the spirituality of the prayer space have to say to that post-pandemic situation? So we can get the top benefit from your answer. If you just want to unshare that screen for a minute. That'd be great. Now,
I mean, that's a great question. We're all thinking, praying, considering, aren't we, how we can contribute to the spiritual lives of children and young people as they return to whatever normal is going to look like in the post-pandemic, if there is such a thing, world. And we're really confident that prayer spaces in schools will have a really key contribution to make to not only the spiritual lives of children and young people when they go back to school, but also to their mental and emotional well-being as well. In 2018, we commissioned some academic research by an RE professor at York St John University, and that highlighted the fact that prayer spaces in schools really do contribute to children's spiritual well-being and spiritual development. And it showed that research clearly that prayer spaces help children to explore four key areas of relational spirituality, and that is their relationship with themselves, their relationship with others, the other people in their lives, their relationship with the world or the community at large, and their relationship with the sacred and the divine. So those four key areas of spirituality have been shown to be explored in depth by children and young people in prayer spaces. And, in terms of, we can all relate to this, in terms of our relationship with ourselves, we've all had to consider over this last period of time, some big questions, who am I? How am I dealing with this? How do I process these very strong emotions that I'm feeling? What is it that I really value? What's really important to me? Because lots of things that we've considered are really important to us have been stripped away at this time. So it's caused us to think about these things. What do I believe about life and death? I mean, huge consideration around that question. How do I cope with things like loss and change and worry? How do I learn to appreciate the things in my life that? And so prayer spaces allow children and young people to explore this relationship with themselves. In terms of our relationship with others, we have seen an unprecedented pulling together. Unprecedented in my lifetime, never mind a child or a young person's lifetime, where our communities have had to work together. We've recognised our interconnectedness. We've recognised our need for each other, and prayer spaces, through the activities that are in the space, enable them to think about that. How do I connect with other people? In terms of our relationship with the world, children and people have probably thought about the world more than ever in this last 10 months because it's in your face. This is a global pandemic. We've thought about the world, the state of the world, the messiness of the world, not just pandemic related, but it's enabled us to think about the world in other terms. What are we doing about the climate emergency? What kind of world do we want to build after this pandemic is through? And then in terms of relationship with the sacred and divine, it's been reported in the media that many, many people have prayed during this pandemic who would not ordinarily have prayed, would not identify as religious or Christian. And yet it has heightened a sense of, is there something bigger out there? Is there someone bigger out there? Is there someone in control ultimately?
Yeah.
And so prayer spaces offer young people and children the opportunity to explore these things, and in terms of mental well-being and emotional well-being as well, as children return to school, over and over, children and young people emerge from prayer spaces reporting that they feel calmer, that they feel more peaceful, that they've made up with a friend, even if not verbally, but in their own heart, spirit. They've made up with someone. They've forgiven someone. They've thought about their hopes and their dreams. They've processed a loss. Or they've just relaxed and sat still for 10 minutes. These are the things that children and people say as they emerge from prayer spaces, and they're going to be absolutely crucial as the children and people go back to school. I think that, the pandemic has heightened all of our awareness of the spiritual, of the non-material, of what really matters in life. That friendship matters, that love matters, that community matters. And the themes of the prayer activities in a prayer space, they touch on all of these things. And the wonderful thing, Dave, about prayer spaces is that they are open and hospitable to children and young people of all faiths and none. There is no pressure to pray in a prayer space. It's an opportunity to think and reflect if that's what the young people want to do. And so we're convinced that prayer spaces will be even more vital than ever as children and young people return to school.
I think one of the pieces of studies that were done in the past by Carolyn Edwards about young male spirituality is that boys often don't like to be made to participate, but they will participate if it's voluntary and they can do it at their own speed. And picking up on something I was saying before we came into the interview with you, part of what happens is that people dwell on something which is good and wholesome and wonderful, and the prayer space often switches off the noise so that the spiritual signal can come through. I read a lot of the testimonies from prayer spaces in schools, newsletter and website, and it often talks about exactly the thing you've just described, about the child saying, I was at peace, I was able to calm down, I was able to begin to reflect on who I am. So that's wonderful. Now, there's one other thing before you go. Bristol, you live there and you don't work for prayer spaces all the time. So what have you been able to do in the interaction with schools in Bristol?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to share that. So in Bristol, I am one half of Bristol Schools Connection with my lovely friend Jane. And we basically help and support local churches to serve and bless their school and to create space in school for spiritual dialogue. We do that in all sorts of ways. Obviously, during the last 10 months, like prayer space in schools, we haven't, most of our volunteers around in the churches around Bristol haven't been able to go to school. So we've been developing some resources. So it's great to have the chance just to share. We've developed something called Christmas in a Box, which went out as a pilot project at Christmas and had we were really thrilled with what came back. It's basically a set of 6 boxes, and inside each box there are some beautiful objects, some items which help to tell the story of each of the characters of the Nativity, and children physically unpack the box and explore the story in a very tactile, reflective way, and then do an activity which helps them think about what can I learn from this story for my own life, whatever my beliefs. And we're currently, I haven't got photos yet, just a logo, we're currently developing Easter in a Box, the movie, which is going to be the same format as Christmas in a Box, 6 boxes for them to unpack the props from the scenes of the Easter movie. And so we're kind of inviting them on set to imagine and explore these different scenes in the same way. And that will be coming out, we hope, mid-February in time for Easter. And both these resources are sort of COVID safe in the sense that churches could literally offer it to the school for a teacher to facilitate, or they could offer it to the school and take part via Zoom in the classroom. And hopefully in subsequent years, churches will be able to just take it in themselves and lead it with a team of volunteers. But yeah, thanks for the opportunity for just flagging that up. And if anyone's interested and wants to know more, you can get in touch with me at liz@bristolschoolsconnection.co.uk or find us on Facebook.
That's great. Really great. One of the important things I think is that when we bring people together in a conference like Hand in Hand, that we are digging deep, see what the scripture says, but we're also looking for ideas that can be delivered by a local congregation. And I just want to thank you for all that you've shared in the last little while that will help us do that. Thanks, Liz.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, I'm talking now to Sara Hargreaves, and we're engaging with her following on from all that we've already looked at, because one of the things that we discovered in prayer spaces in schools is that children are having an emotional experience often in the prayer space. They're having emotional experiences in the middle of the pandemic. And Sara has written about Jesus and his emotions out of her work with Engage Worship, which is the project she works with. So I just wanted to take a few minutes with Sara, and hopefully it'll help all of us. One of the things that struck me is we often have a high view of the divinity of Christ, and in that we might miss out on his emotions. Why do you think it's important to reflect on this and engage with our children about it?
Well, we, as Christians, we often talk about discipleship as becoming more like Jesus, right? That's clearly, what we see in the Gospels with the rabbi and the apprentices. But that's what we often tell children as well, is we want to become more like Jesus. But if you present the Jesus that is a kind of image of a Greek god or, highly divine, we're really setting them up for failure. If you say you want to become like Jesus, but actually you're going to be this thing that you can't be, then that's impossible. Or even in evangelical circles, maybe Jesus is presented as a great teacher. And if that's all you know about Jesus, and then what does that mean? Am I supposed to be a teacher? What does that mean for a child? Whereas if we hold to the kind of Orthodox Christian doctrine of Jesus being fully God and fully human, and we present a Jesus that modeled for us what it means to be fully human, then becoming like him makes a lot more sense, I think, and especially for children. So the way that he handles the ordinary human emotions, I think, is part of that. If he's fully human, then he is fully an emotional being like we are. We suffer bereavement and Jesus suffered bereavement. We find joy in human life and Jesus found joy in human life. We get annoyed with people who behave badly. Jesus got annoyed with people who behave badly. And so to work out how Jesus responded to those emotions, how did he deal with them and how did he manage him? All of a sudden, the question of how can I become more like Jesus makes a lot more sense, because we actually have an actual role model to base our human life on. And if we're going to be a disciple of Jesus, I think that's really important. I think that's helpful in how we talk to the children about Jesus.
One of the things that for many children who are not in churches or church families, they either have a really fuzzy view of God and who he is, or a kind of a distant view of who he is. Yeah. And one of the things that struck me about your resource is that you talk about Jesus and sadness. And at this time, that might be really helpful to some children, and people might be able to take something from that and apply it to some of their work outside the immediate sphere of the church. Can you just talk me through Jesus and sadness and how what you're doing helps the child and the responsible adult or the parent or whoever it is engage with this reality about who Jesus is?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing, and this is the main point of the whole resource, but the first thing to really highlight is that Jesus became sad, and in the book I retell the story of Jesus at Lazarus' grave and have a picture of him crying alongside Mary. And, you know, I was reading around that passage when I was writing it, and there are, you know, many theologians who have this kind of maybe a complicated view of Jesus' humanity, who will say, oh no, he was weeping because he was upset that they didn't believe in resurrection, whatever, which is, you know, a far-fetched theory, I think. Whereas he was in a situation where one of his best friends had just died, and two women who he loved and respected were distraught. And I think the fact that he wept with them, I think, is the most logical conclusion to that story. So I think that's the main thing to say. Jesus cried, you know. I don't know, many children won't have seen adults cry necessarily. You know, we're quite good at keeping those things inside, but Jesus did cry, and that was his way of expressing sadness. And so to say that's an okay way of expressing sadness, I think that's really important. What I say in here, which I've kind of got from reading some psychology stuff, is that the point of sadness is to get our brains used to loss, because it's such a shock to our brain, and we need to kind of take time to kind of understand that. And we might think of loss as being, you know, I lost someone who died, or I lost a thing, but actually right now everybody is suffering from loss, even if that's just I've lost time with my friends, I've lost schooling, I've lost you know, events or relationships that kind of not worked out. And it's really important that we allow the sadness to help us handle that, because psychologists say that if we don't, then that emotion will fly out somewhere else. I don't know if you've seen that, where people are really sad, but they don't allow themselves to feel it, and then they snap at their kids, or the kids might snap at us because we've not done that thing that Jesus did of allowing the sadness to take time and be present and express itself. So in Jesus, in this story, Jesus weeps, you know, and to kind of welcome that in children rather than minimize it. Sometimes I guess kids are told that they're a nuisance when they're upset, and if we as adults want to model God to them, then we need to be have that same posture that God has towards sadness, I think, and that Jesus has. A quote here on the next page from Psalm 34, it says, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. And we find that quite a lot, I think, in scripture in total, that actually when you are sad, when you are broken, there seems to be a special kind of presence of God around you. So if we can model that by being present to the children in our lives, then we are modeling something of God's nature. And Jesus didn't tell Mary to, you know, suck it up, or he's going to be healed anyways. He was with her, and he wept with her. So I think that's really important.
Great.
I think the other thing I wanted to say was one of the things, because, you know, we all need ways of coping right now. And so on this last page, there is a couple of ways of coping. And the first one is about waves of sadness. I don't know if you've seen children, they're really sad one moment and then they're happy the next. And as adults, we struggle with that because we think if you're sad, you're sad. But actually, that's a healthier way of being. So to accept that your body needs break from sadness sometimes is useful. But the final thing here is about thankfulness. And, you know, the Bible tells us to be thankful all the time, doesn't it? And psychologists say that thankfulness can work as an anchor in our, if we feel sad, that can stop us from being overwhelmed. And so finding ways to be thankful. Just sharing here, this is our little inside of a kitchen cupboard. This is our little practice during this third lockdown as our family, where everybody gets a piece of paper after breakfast, and we ask the children and ourselves to draw or write something that we feel thankful for, because sadness is about what we've lost. So for my teenage daughter, that means she's lost time with friends. Thankfulness is about what we have. So we have Zoom and we have WhatsApp messages, and so that can help anchor us in those kind of crisis times.
Great. Well, I would really commend the Jesus and the Emotions resource for a widespread group of uses. But some of you might want to get hold of that resource and get it from all your normal suppliers. And we'll be putting a slide in the rolling resource material that's been used throughout the day to help you connect with that book and find out more about what Sara is thinking about in this context, which I think is immensely helpful and useful. Thanks for being with us in this session, and be blessed in the rest of your day. Thank you.